Greetings and salutations. Hello, I'm reading House of Hades today. I finished Mark of Athena a couple days ago, and at first I was gonna go straight into House of Hades, but I didn't read it all yesterday basically because I needed a break. I needed to recover. Mark of Athena really made me really emotional. It really affected me. I finished editing that yesterday and it's over an hour long, so by the time this is up, that will have also been up, and if you watched all of it, honestly, you're a fucking trooper. Thank you for that. And I needed to take a break, but now I'm going into House of Hades once again. This cover is fucking ugly. Annabeth has straight hair, and that's bothered me since I was a child. Honestly, at least she's blonde. I'm in a really bad headspace today. I was big sad last night, I'm big sad today. We'll see how House of Hades treats me. We'll see if it helps or not. To my wonderful readers, sorry about the last cliffhanger. Well, no, not really. Ha. But seriously, I love you guys. I remember the first time I read that, I was filled with visceral rage. I know why Rick did this, and I know it makes more sense just narrative-wise to start with the characters we kind of care about less right now, but I always struggle to care about Hazel's first few chapters, like her first POV, because all I want to do is see what Percy and Annabeth are. All I want to do is catch up with them, make sure that they're okay. So while I love Hazel deeply, I never really engaged with these first few chapters at all. Most of all, she wanted to feel safe. She was tired of being scared and worried all the time. Hazel's 13, 14. She shouldn't have to be scared and worried all the time. Can the gods just let demigods be kids and thrive and be happy, please, maybe? She glanced at her half-brother. Since they'd rescued him from the giants, he'd started to regain his strength, but he was still painfully thin. His black shirt and jeans hung off his skeletal frame. Long, dark hair framed his sunken eyes. His olive complexion had turned a sickly, greenish-white like the color of tree sap. In human years, he was barely 14, just a year older than Hazel, but that didn't tell the whole story. Like Hazel, Nico D'Angelo was a demigod from another era. He radiated a kind of old energy, a melancholy that came from knowing he didn't belong in the modern world. Hazel hadn't known him very long, but she understood, even shared his sadness. The children of Hades, Pluto, whatever, rarely had happy lives, and judging from what Nico told her the night before, their biggest challenge was yet to come when they reached the House of Hades. I just want Nico D'Angelo to be happy, for once. For once. She had to make Percy and Annabeth proud of her. She had to take the initiative. Why is that me? When I'm struggling in life, I'm gotta make Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase proud. Won or lost without us. A small guilty part of Hazel found that appealing. She'd been wishing for the chance to be a normal girl. She didn't want any more pain or suffering for herself and her friends. They'd already been through so much. She's right, they have. And also, Hazel's 13. She's allowed to be selfish. She should want to take the selfish road. West, east, or south, they die. Not an option, Hazel said. That's my bitch. That's my girl. Thank you, Hazel. Also, it's very scary to me how close Percy and Annabeth were to death. Sometimes, I remember before Tower of Nero came out, I had this irrational fear and belief that Annabeth was going to die. And I would it would keep me up, and I would cry about it at night. The idea of losing a comfort character, and I understand that she is a character, but I genuinely mourn fictional characters if they're real people. And just reading this, how close they were to death on this quest, I don't like it. Long before the Olympians came to power, I ruled the mist. Despite this, in the first Titan War millennia ago, I sided with Zeus against Kronos. I was not blind to Kronos' cruelty, and I hoped Zeus would prove a better king. She gave a small, bitter laugh. When Demeter lost her daughter Persephone, kidnapped by your father, I guided Demeter through the darkest night with my torches, helping her search. When the giants rose the first time, I again sided with the gods. We all faced choices. When Kronos arose the second time, I made a mistake. I supported him. I had grown tired of being ignored by the so-called major gods. Despite my years of faithful service, they mistrusted me, refused me a seat in their hall. The polecat gal shouted angrily. It doesn't matter anymore, the goddess sighed. I've made peace again with Olympus. Even now, when they are laid low, their Greek and Roman personas fighting each other, I will help them. Greek or Roman, I have always been Hecate. Honestly, she made some good points. I really like the point of Hecate saying, I sided with Zeus because I thought he would be a better leader, and then I sided with him again in another war, but I got tired of the mistreatment from them, so I made a poor decision and I sided with Kronos. You can see how pretty much everyone who was on Kronos' side in the Second Titan War was only there because of their bitterness towards the Olympians, and I think that that's an important distinction to make, that most of the people who sided with Kronos, besides Kronos himself, were not evil. They were just rightfully angry at the gods. She'd lost track of how long she and Percy had been falling. Hours, a day. It felt like an eternity. They'd been holding hands ever since they dropped into the chasm. Now Percy pulled her close, hugging her tight as they tumbled through absolute darkness. Why am I already about to cry? She'd never expected her life to be easy. Most demigods died young at the hands of terrible monsters. That was the way it had been since ancient times. The Greeks invented tragedy. They knew the greatest heroes didn't get happy endings. Still, this wasn't fair. She'd gone through so much to retrieve that statue of Athena. Just when she'd succeeded, when things had been looking up and she'd been reunited with Percy, they'd plunged to their deaths. Even the gods couldn't devise a fate so twisted. It's not fair. It's not fair. Annabeth pressed her lips to Percy's ear. I love you. She wasn't sure he could hear her, but if they were going to die, she wanted those to be her last words. I don't have the emotional capacity for this book. Hi, editing Ashlee here. There's no point to this whatsoever. Just while editing, I am noticing exactly why I was bullied as a kid for having elf ears. I see it. What's the point of struggling? They told her. You're dead anyway. You'll never leave this place. Are the voices in the river my depression? Cause tell me about New Rome, she demanded. What were your plans for us? New Rome. For us? Yeah, seaweed dream. You said we could have a future there. Tell me. Annabeth had never wanted to leave Camp Half-Blood. It was the only real home she'd ever known. But days ago on the Argo Tree, that was only days ago. But days ago on the Argo Tree, Percy had told her that he imagined a future for the two of them among the Roman demigods. In the city of New Rome, veterans of the Legion could settle down safely, go to college, get married, even have kids. Architecture, Percy murmured. The fog started to clear from his eyes. Thought you'd like the houses, the parks. There's one street with all these cool fountains. It's the fact that when Percy was losing all motivation, Annabeth knew that the way to break him out of that was to get him to talk about their future together, because he had just broken her out of that mindset just by grabbing her hand. And the first thing Percy thinks of is just all the architecture Annabeth will love. I'm actually crying. I'm 30 pages into this novel and I'm crying. You've got a brilliant plan, haven't you? It's a plan, Annabeth murmured. I don't know about brilliant. We need to find the River of Fire. I always feel like everyone always thinks of Annabeth as like this person who's like super level-headed and she never does anything risky or stupid. She's always the voice of reason with Percy. Like, no, they're such a chaotic duo. Annabeth is like an impulsive idiot as well. If she thinks something might be an idea, might help, she will try anything. Percy will come up to her with like some weird fucking idea and Annabeth will be like, brilliant, I'm gonna know exactly how to execute it now. That's the kind of dynamic that it is. And Annabeth just suggested drinking fire to her boyfriend. We really think that bitch is just not chaotic at all, really? Percy's eyes locked on something behind her. Annabeth spun as a massive dark shape hurtled down at her, a snarling, monstrous blob with spindly barbed legs and glinting eyes. She had time to think, Arachne. But she was frozen in terror, her senses smothered by the sickly sweet smell. Then she had the familiar shink of Percy's ballpoint pen transforming into a sword. His blade swept over her head in a glowing bronze arc. A horrible wail echoed through the canyon. Annabeth stood there stunned as yellow dust, the remains of Arachne, rained around her like tree pollen. We love to see it. We love to see Arachne be slaughtered. I hope she never reforms. I do kind of feel a bit bad for her. I think Athena was harsh on her, but also I'm mad at her right now. She dragged them into Tartarus, not cool. I'm mad at you now. You can die. Percy kicked the dust on the rocks, his expression grim and dissatisfied. She died too easily considering how much torture she put you through. She deserved worse. Annabeth couldn't argue with that, but the hard edge in Percy's voice made her unsettled. She'd never seen someone get so angry or vengeful on her behalf. It almost made her glad Arachne had died quickly. And this is the first time we see a major theme in this book, which is Percy being very unhealthily overprotective. It bothers me how much people will point out any traits that Annabeth have that could potentially be unhealthy in a relationship, yet no one really talks about this with Percy, which is really bad sometimes. The beautiful thing about Annabeth's jealousy, Percy's overprotection, if any traits they have that could lead to an unhealthy relationship is that they acknowledge them and they work through them and they get past them, like healthy relationships do. Those traits being there and those things being potential problems but being worked through, that does not make them an unhealthy relationship. It makes them a healthy relationship. In saying that, does someone want to get that angry and vengeful on my behalf? Kind of hot. Honestly, I love to see Kelly again. Something that's really fun about this novel is like seeing monsters from the past. It makes me really nostalgic and happy. I know I shouldn't because they're monsters and I shouldn't want to see them, but like I like the callbacks. They make me happy. They make me excited. Just leave one special morsel for me. The one named Percy Jackson. Annabeth fought down a style of her own. She forgot about her fear. She wanted to jump over the boulder and slash the monsters to dust with her knife. Except she didn't have it anymore. We love Annabeth being just as protective over Percy. I mean, we don't, because that's unhealthy, but we love a pair of heroes who are just ready to be stupid and run into battle for the other. Have you heard of dying in a dream, boy? The woman asked. It is possible at the hands of a sorceress. Fun fact, as a kid, that was my worst fear. I was convinced I was going to die in a dream, and I was terrified of it because there was an episode of Charmed in which this man would enter girls' dreams and kill them in their dreams. This was prior to me watching Nightmare on Elm Street. At that point, I was used to the concept, and that was my worst fear, so stay away from me, please. His green plaid trousers were pinned to the cuffs and held up with bright red suspenders over a striped pink and black woman's blouse. I know this is meant to sound like disgustingly hideous. I feel like some people could pull it off. I'm not gonna lie to you, I feel like some people could pull it off. I feel like some cool, artsy, like Eden indie people could pull that off. I'm gonna be honest. Just then, thunder boomed overhead, lightning flashed, and the bars in the nearest window burst into sizzling, melted subs of iron. Jason flew in like Peter Pan, electricity sparking around him, and his gold sword steaming. Leo whistled appreciatively. Man, you just wasted an awesome entrance. We love Jason looking like Peter Pan, but like as someone who tries very, very hard to defend Jason Grace and his right as a hero, he does spend a lot of fights not in the action. He really does. The more I read this, the more I'm like, oh, my biggest what if, Pastelo said, should have taken a crystal. That's what he kept muttering in his sleep the night we stole it, but no idea what he meant. I know what he meant. Okay, I'm about to read another Tartarus portion, so I need some caffeine, so we have an energy drink, kiddos. Never had this flavor before, we'll give a review. I'm more of a pipeline punch kind of person, but this was on sale and a girl is cheap. Oh, that's really nice. 10 out of 10, just tastes like mango. Do recommend. Percy had taken his girlfriend on some romantic walks before. This wasn't one of them. Saying that he'd taken her on some romantic walks is an understatement. Friendly reminder that Percy Jackson once took Annabeth Chase to Paris for their 1-month anniversary, and they had dinner in the Eiffel fucking Tower. She tied her blonde hair back with a strip of denim torn from her jeans, and in the fiery light of the river, her grey eyes flickered. Despite being beat up, sooty, and dressed like a homeless person, she looked great to Percy. That is so funny because literally every time Annabeth described Percy in her few chapters, she was like, he looked like shit. He looked ill. He looked gross. And he's like, she still looks great. So what if they were in Tartarus? So what if they stood a slim chance of surviving? He was so glad that they were together, he had the ridiculous urge to smile. Stop it. Stop it right now. Stop it. Absolutely not. Absolutely illegal. I love this boy so much. Tell me why I'm emotional over them bringing up the shoes that Luke gave them and questioning whether they're still in Tartarus somewhere. I shouldn't be nostalgic over that. That shouldn't make me yearn for I don't even know what. Yet here we are. He didn't think much of fates and prophecies, but he did believe in one thing. Annabeth and he were supposed to be together. I don't have words for that one. That left Annabeth's favourite tactics: trickery, talk, delay. They low-key are my favourite tactics personally. So, he started. I guess you're wondering what we're doing in Tartarus. That's probably not the tone he used, but that's the tone I imagine. Percy wanted to hug Annabeth. She was so brilliant. That has the same energy of, Lydia, you are so smart I could kiss you right now. Do not kiss me. I'm not gonna. Did it anyway. Not outing myself as a Teen Wolf stan. Bob is here. Bob makes me happy. I remember the first time I read this book, I could not believe that Bob was there. And I remember using it as this like real bragging point to my friends who were also reading the books. They didn't know who Bob was because they never read the Demigod Files, because I tried to get everyone to read the Demigod Files and the Demigod Diaries and no one did. And then I would be like, well, you know what? You would know his full backstory and you'd be familiar with his character and you would understand the importance of him. If you had read the Demigod Files, they still didn't read it, but I felt elite. Still to this day, one of my favorite things in the world is Percy Jackson, and I think it's in the Bronze Dragon, the Capture the Flag story from the Demigod Files. It's just everything to me. I'm gonna be honest, kiddos, and some people are gonna be mad at me for this, but House of Hades culture for me. Reading the Tartarus chapters, having a good old time, that's what I'm here for. Then getting to the other chapters and be like, I don't want to read this, and then obviously enjoying it once I do, because I love like every character and I really enjoy these quests and the way that Rick writes. I never have a bad time, but every time I finish like the Tartarus section I'm like, I have to go back to everyone else. I obviously still enjoy it, but like that sense of dread and like, ugh, I don't care about this happens every time and you're all gonna be angry. But that's my truth. Annabeth had been kind to him. Even when he was so distracted he'd acted like a buffoon, Annabeth had been patient and helpful. While Ares screamed that Athena's children couldn't be trusted and Mars bellowed at him to kill all the Greeks, Frank had grown to respect Annabeth. I love Frank and I love all of Annabeth's little friendships with the other members of the Seven. She's really close with all of them, really, except Jason, and we don't really talk about that. Obviously, her and Piper are very close. Obviously, her and Percy are very close. We don't see heaps of her interacting with Hazel, but they seem to get along very well. Jason and her eventually get along, but they're a little rough at first. Annabeth doesn't really trust him at first, but like Annabeth is clearly quite close with both Frank and especially Leo, and we don't really talk about that much, but I think we should. Annabeth being kind and patient and welcoming to everyone and making sure that she understands everyone on the Seven, especially considering that she did fit into that leader role. It's a very important part of her character and just not something people talk about. Appreciate Annabeth, I beg of you. He'd always been scared of Nico. Now he wanted to drop kick the son of Hades into the nearest canal. Maybe that wasn't fair, but Frank didn't care. Neither did the war god screaming in his head. That isn't fair, and honestly, as much as I love Frank and he is like one of my absolute favorite characters in this series, this really disappoints me. I love Frank because he's so kind and understanding and compassionate, and he goes against like every Aries kid stereotype, yet he's just letting his anger get the best of him and his personal alliances, especially considering his girlfriend is a daughter of Pluto who's out of time. I feel like he should have such sympathy for Nico in that situation, and I understand that, yeah, Nico's probably a bit of a scary individual if you don't understand him, but Frank should, and he's not putting in any time or effort to. He's letting his fear of him get the better of him, and then just because Nico slipped up in battle, something that Frank can relate to, he's now allowing himself the anger of wanting to kill him? It's natural to feel fear. The war god's voice was surprisingly warm, full of pride. All great warriors are afraid. Only the stupid and the delusional are not. But you faced your fear, my son. You did what you had to do, like Horatius. This was your bridge, and you defended it. One, Mars is just such a better dad than Ares, holy shit, but two, like, just Frank getting validation from his dad just makes me happy. Frank was taller, his gut had shrunk, his chest seemed bulkier. Frank had had growth spurts before. Once he'd woken up 2 centimeters taller than when he'd gone to sleep. But this was nuts. Was this some of the dragon and lion had stayed with him when he turned back to human? I don't... Maybe I can fix it. Hazel laughed with delight. Why? You look amazing. I do. I mean, you were handsome before, but you look older and taller and so distinguished. I honestly prefer Frank like as he is. I think it's nice to have a very, very powerful hero who doesn't necessarily look like an archetypal hero. So I'm glad that when we get to trials, it's said that the blessing of Mars kind of wears off a little bit, but it is fun to have. It's fun to see Frank this way and to just have him look like the badass that he is. And also Hazel's reaction's really sweet. Her only comfort was Percy. Every so often he would glance over and smile or squeeze her hand. He had to be just as scared and miserable as she was, and she loved him for trying to make her feel better. Every time I read a sentence that, is along the lines of she loved him for it, I want to cry. Annabeth collapsed on a broken slab of marble, too exhausted to take another step. Percy stood over her protectively, scanning their surroundings. That's my kink. Is it my turn to watch? No, we're good. I let you sleep. Percy! Percy, I agree with Annabeth. Don't be a hero. You need sleep too. Percy Jackson, take care of yourself. Percy Jackson is not your responsibility to take care of everyone else all the time. Take care of yourself a little bit, please. Also take care of me. Percy Jackson, if you would like to hit me up. I'm an Annabeth Kenny. We'd cuddle. Can I make these jokes? Here's a little tangent. So I'm 19 now. I started reading these books when I was 10. So obviously I've grown up with a massive crush on Percy Jackson. But now that I'm 19, like he's 16 here. And like obviously in my brain he's like aged up, but I'm like, I age him up in my head, but can I still have a crush on him? I don't know. I get worried about this a lot. You're planning something. You've got that I'm planning something look. I don't have an I'm planning something look. Yeah, you totally do. Your eyebrows knit and your lips pressed together. And do you have a pen? Percy just noticing those things about Annabeth makes me happy. Also, that little back and forth, that banter that's still present even here is so comforting. They are everything to me. They are my comfort ships. They are my comfort. I would say they're my comfort heteros, but neither of those people are straight. These are the biggest bisexual characters I've ever seen. But like, they're my comfort characters. They are everything to me. He uncapped the pen. As usual, it sprang into a full-size sword. Annabeth had watched him do this hundreds of times. Normally, when he fought, Percy simply discarded the cap. It always appeared in his pocket later as needed. When he touched the cap to the point of the sword, it would turn back into a ballpoint pen. What if you touched the cap to the other end of the sword? Annabeth said, like where you'd put the cap if you were actually going to write with the pen. Percy looked doubtful, but he touched the cap to the hilt of the sword. Riptide shrank back into a ballpoint pen, but now the writing point was exposed. May I? Annabeth plucked it from his hand. I see a lot of people like being like, I can't believe it took Percy years to figure out that Riptide could work as a pen. He didn't even figure it out. Annabeth figured it out. Rachel? Percy asked, you mean Rachel? Oracle of Delphi Rachel? That's the one. Annabeth suppressed a smile. Whenever she brought up Rachel's name, Percy got nervous. At one point, Rachel had been interested in dating Percy. That was ancient history. Rachel and Annabeth were good friends now. Annabeth and Rachel being friends. We love to see it. Connor, give this to Rachel. Not a prank. Don't be a moron. Love, Annabeth. I don't know why I love that so much, but I do. This was like a very Australian thing, but I don't know if it's even present across all of Australia. I don't know. When I was in like middle schoolish time, we used to have to read books in our spare time to prove that we were like smart kids, and you would have to do like various different activities about the books that you would get graded on. It was part of our like English grade, I think, and it was also proof that you read them, or answer questions, do quiz things, to prove that you read the books. I remember whenever this book was published, I did one where one of the options we had was rewrite a part of the book from another character's perspective. I used to love doing these, by the way, because it was just free range to write fan fiction, and I would get like A grades on my fan fictions. It was great. I miss this. But I wrote that from Connor's perspective. I wrote like him being at camp and getting the note from Annabeth, and that just jogged my memory about that. That was really fun. I feel like the way that Percy and Annabeth handle Bob and interacting with Bob, and Percy wanting to educate him on like good and bad titans, versus Annabeth being like very, very skeptical to do this and absolutely being convinced that Percy is making a mistake, is a really good example of Annabeth's trust issues versus Percy's tendency to trust everyone until they give him a reason not to. Once you break Percy's trust, it's very, very, very difficult to get it back. But he will trust anyone, whereas Annabeth will not trust pretty much anyone, but once you have it, you won't lose it ever. And I just think it's a cool exploration of that. I'm more like Annabeth there. I'm like the trust issues, but once you break my trust. No, I'll forgive you. I'll forgive you for it. I'll just not trust you again. But I won't be mad about it. Percy gets very angry if you like look at Luke. So I guess I'm more like Annabeth. Why am I giving myself a psych evaluation? He fell into Tartarus to be with you, said a voice in her head. If he dies, it will be your fault. One of my favourite Percival fanfictions ever, called Impossible Year, is about this, but I also think that is a massive amount of guilt that Annabeth is carrying around. She feels responsible for what happens to Percy in Tartarus, clearly because he fell into Tartarus for her. Obviously, he doesn't hold any kind of grudges. I don't think he would blame Annabeth in any way, shape or form for anything that happened to him down there, but she would blame herself for it. And in particularly like college years, I think Annabeth would see a lot of Percy's PTSD and the trauma from Tartarus and also take blame for that. And I think the weight of that would get too much for Annabeth, and I think they would break up. I know you're all gonna yell at me, but I think Percy and Annabeth would break up for a year or two to deal with that trauma away from each other, for Annabeth to understand that it wasn't her fault that, you know, Percy made that decision, for them to kind of get back to a place to be able to be a healthy relationship again. I am one of the people who think Annabeth and Percy did break up for a little bit. The cat could have been a demon or horrible underworld monster in disguise, but Annabeth couldn't help it. She picked it up and cuddled it. The little thing was bony under its fur, but otherwise it seemed perfectly normal. Annabeth Chase is a cat person. Annabeth Chase seeing a kitten in Tartarus and just being like, I'ma cuddle it. Big mood, I relate. This is my kitten. He's a cat now. His name's Percy Catson. You all know him. You all love him. I love him deeply. Annabeth chases me. Annabeth chases me. I would do the same thing. I freaking love Annabeth. I feel so represented by that. The inability to not cuddle a kitten. I relate so much. Guys, if I call my next cat Small Bob, don't judge me. Don't judge me for it. The cursed demon ladies are here. This is, I think, the worst thing they experience in Tartarus. We're at Hazel chapters now before we get there. I don't know if I have the emotional capacity to read that today. I might have to stop after Hazel's chapters. I'm gonna be honest, I feel really bad for the turtle. I can't read about them like attacking a giant turtle, because what do giant turtles make me think of? Make me think of the mystical turtle from It by Stephen King, who is a good symbol, a nice symbol, a symbol of hope. This is upsetting because that's what I associate giant turtles with. Hazel stretched at her arm. She didn't think about it. She just concentrated on the water and called for imperial gold. A stupid idea. The sword was much too far away, probably hundreds of feet underwater. But she felt a quick tug in her fingers like a bite on a fishing line, and Jin's blade flew out of the water and into her hand. To everyone who doesn't appreciate Hazel Levesque, how dare you? Do you see this shit? She is the coolest person to ever lived. Also, she's a fucking sweetheart. Also, she's one of the most powerful demigods ever. The dead saw what they believed they would see. So did the living. That's really true. As someone who looks back on all of my past with heavy nostalgia lenses, I always think things were like better than they were, and then I'll read back like old diaries or anything, or even just think about how much I was struggling at the time and be like, oh, I'm not looking at this with the truth. I've made this what I want it to be with hindsight. Like, just nostalgia makes things seem so much nicer. So that's really true. We do just see what we believe we will see. Hazel is so fucking ridiculously powerful. Why do we always forget her? Whenever people like rank the most powerful of the big three kids, people are always saying like, is it Percy, is it Nico, is it Jason? Why is Hazel never brought into the discussion? Because Hazel should be part of the discussion because she's crazy powerful. And Hazel Levesque, you will not believe me, but I am proud of your strength. Sometimes the only way I can care for my children is to keep my distance. I actually really understand that mentality. All right, I am gonna stop there, at least for now, because I'm big sad and I know that the next chapter really affects me. So we'll catch up with you sometime soon, when I feel more prepared to do that. All right, new day. Am I emotionally prepared for this chapter this time around? No, I'm actually in a very unstable headspace, but I'm also self-destructive, so why not read a chapter that hurts me deeply? Also, yes, I wear this hoodie in too many YouTube videos. I live in this hoodie or that one tangled sweatshirt that I have. Leave me alone. All right, 2 curses in, hold back tears. Going well, going splendid. This is so unfair. And like I said earlier, I was like, I love callbacks to other monsters unless it's in this chapter. I've got you, Percy promised. He put his arm around Annabeth, but as the Arachne advanced, he didn't know how he could protect either of them. I'm just in pain with this chapter. It really affects me for some reason. Percy's voice disintegrated like someone had hit it with a celestial bronze blade. He'd never felt so low and dishonorable, so unworthy of having a friend. The Arachne attacked, and this time Bob did not stop them. I don't blame Bob for that. Percy wasn't a friend. It's not to say that Percy's a bad person for that. Percy's had some shit going on. He hasn't really had the time. And he's like 16, he's preoccupied. I think Nico visiting him shows how good of a person Nico is. I don't blame Percy for that, and I don't blame Bob for being hurt by it either, though. Shouldn't have put makeup on before reading this chapter. That was an idiotic choice. The curse that Annabeth can't feel or hear Percy anywhere, and the fact that it happens right after she's blinded is so upsetting. That would be so terrifying. And her asking why he left her. Yeah, this is why I hate Calypso. I know that it was a momentary thought, but fuck that. Fuck that. You don't blame the girl that the boy left you for. You blame the boy who left you. Cursing her to be alone and abandoned is not the same as your curse. Calypso's curse is horrible, but it's not what she curses Annabeth with. What she curses Annabeth with is worse. Percy clenched his jaw. He didn't care how many curses he suffered. He had to keep these leathery old hags focused on him and protect Annabeth as long as he could. He yelled in fury and attacked them all. I can't do this! Percy Jackson thinking the words "I couldn't leave her alone" about Annabeth Chase is making me have a breakdown. I know he means it in a literal sense of she's in a fight with monsters and she's a little helpless realistically at the moment. She doesn't have a weapon, she's blind, but just hearing him say that just in the context of her and all her abandonment issues, like as an Annabeth Kinney, I'm emotional over that one. Now Percy blaming himself for Calypso and thinking that her curse is valid actually makes me angry. I understand why he feels that way, but it makes me angry because no, you had a lot of shit going on. It's not Percy's responsibility to check up and make sure the gods kept all the promises. It's the responsibility of the gods to keep their promises. It was unfair, and the gods should be held accountable, and least of all, Annabeth shouldn't be cursed for. She did nothing to Calypso. The fact that this is the only time in Heroes of Olympus we see Grover, unless I'm wrong, unless he's in Blood of Olympus briefly, but I don't think he is, absolutely ridiculous. Can we have Grover back as a main character? I miss Grover so much. Also, I am still in love with Rachel Elizabeth there. Her carrying around her blue hairbrush, everything to me. She is everything to me. Look, I'm not trying to judge anyone's ship ever. I have never understood the Rachel Octavian thing. I'm trying to read this part with that in mind. I don't get it. I'm sorry. Grover Underwood interrupted. You mean your initials are rah? Raina's hand drifted towards her dagger. Grover! Read a room, buddy. Read a room. I miss him though. We don't have much time, Frank warned. It's already July 9th. That July 9th, the beat of your heart. Jump through your shirt, I can still feel your arms. I hope they were all celebrating Last Kiss Day, as they should. Still, Jason didn't get why Nico pushed people away, why he never spent much time in either camp, why he preferred the dead to the living. I obviously know that Jason, like, his life isn't, like, easy, but him just not being able to wrap his head around that concept shows how much of a support system Jason has always had, and how easy for a demigod, how easy for a hero Jason has had it. Because I feel like it's not that hard to figure out why Nico pushes people away, why he doesn't feel like he belongs at the camp. I feel like it doesn't take much work to figure that out. He knew Raina would find it. She had the instincts of a hunter. Nico's panic when he starts bringing up the one he cares for most in his love life in general is actually a little bit triggering. It's giving me some fun little flashbacks to when I was in the closets. But if facing the god of love meant forcing Nico into some sort of confession about which girl he liked, that didn't seem so bad. Nico, you can do this, Jason said. It might be embarrassing, but it's for the scepter. Jason, I love you. I know you don't know, but it's not that fucking simple at all. You just hiding? You just gonna hide there? He gets camera shy. Look at this. Look at this. Tell him, Nico D'Angelo, Cupid said. Tell him you were a coward, afraid of yourself and your feelings. Tell him the real reason you ran from Camp Half-Blood and why you were always alone. If you're really so adamant about love and the power of love, Cupid, you would understand that you can't force someone to confront their feelings until they're ready. I believe probably more so Cupid's idea of love than Aphrodite's, unfortunately. What a fucking prick. You're not a coward. Yeah, he probably is afraid of himself and his feelings because he's a kid. Give him time. He's just outing him. Don't do that. You should know better, Cupid. You fucking should. Nico, Jason managed to say. It's okay. I get it. Nico glanced over, pain and misery washing across his face. No, you don't, he said. There's no way you can understand. I know Nico's like pushing people away, but he's right. Jason doesn't understand. He can't, he doesn't. I had a crush on Percy, Nico spat. That's the truth. That's the big secret. He glared at Cupid. Happy now? Nico shouldn't have had to be put through that. That's one of the most traumatic things that happens to any character in the series. As a queer person, being outed is indescribably traumatic, especially if it happens before you're ready. Oh, I wouldn't say love always makes you happy. His voice sounded smaller, much more human. Sometimes it makes you incredibly sad. Yep. Not me tearing up at Nico. I've seen a lot of brave things, but what you just did, that was maybe the bravest. I do love Jason Grace. I do. Look, I have such mixed feelings about that moment as a whole because when this book was published, I was a 11-year-old with very conflicting feelings. I was one of those people who kind of always knew that I was queer, or at least from like the age of watching Glee. I resonated a lot with Brittany and Santana, and I was very invested in their relationship because it was the first sapphic relationship I'd ever seen. I realized that some of the obsessions I had with female characters were not the same that my friends had. Sometimes it was more than me idolizing them. I think I always had these inclinations that even at that age that was what was happening. And then when I was 12 and I developed a crush on a girl, I was like, oh, I'd be a bisexual. But I didn't know at the time what that meant. And so reading this as an 11-year-old who already had these feelings but was very ashamed and wasn't ready to confront them yet. It meant a lot to me to have a character in my favorite series in the world, in my favorite fictional world, be queer, be gay. It meant a lot to me. And so I'm quite grateful for that scene in that moment. I'm grateful for Nico's sexuality being explicitly stated. Nico is queer, Nico had a crush on Percy. It is said in explicit detail, and I really respect that because I remember Rick getting a lot of backlash for it at the time, which seems ridiculous because this book was published in like 2013, but he got a lot of backlash for it. A lot of parents were boycotting it, pretty much rioting. And so I really am grateful that Rick didn't care about that and included that representation anyway. It meant a lot to me. However, it's Nico being violently outed while Jason's telling Nico that he's brave at the end makes me cry. It makes me very emotional because Nico didn't really have a choice, and Nico stood up to the test and did what he had to do so they could get the scepter. But I don't necessarily think it was a brave thing because Nico was forced into it. Nico never should have had that experience. I don't love that the first LGBT plus representation we get here is a character being violently outed. Like, that's so traumatic. That was triggering for me to read just as a queer person. So I'm very grateful for the representation. I don't know, I also have problems with that moment, but I think Rick has gotten a lot better with his LGBT plus rep, and that's all we can ask for from authors, particularly like straight white authors. Him wanting to be inclusive, and then and this kind of goes for all of Rick's representation of minorities, but wanting to be inclusive and maybe not doing a great job at the beginning, but learning and growing from that is all we can ask of authors. And now he's using his platform to amplify actual authors of color and authors writing about their own cultures. Like, that's what Rick Riordan Presents is. Yeah, I don't know, I think that's the best we can ask for from authors like that. Annabeth wanted to ask if the giant really used Drake and Hyde for toilet paper, but she decided against it. Bob, do you want to introduce us? Annabeth. Bob patted Percy's legs. This is Percy. That's not even that funny, yet that really amuses me. Look, I know he's dying and all, and it's very sad, but content of Percy Jackson with a kitten makes me very happy in my soul. Picturing Percy Jackson with a kitten curled up on him, it makes me happy. My friend is dying. Can you cure him or not? Her voice caught on the word friend. Percy was a lot more than that. Even boyfriend really didn't cover it. They'd been through so much together. At this point, Percy was part of her. Sometimes annoying part, sure, but definitely a part she couldn't live without. I just have a lot of feelings. That quote was my lock screen for like 3 years. I was obsessed with it. That's still one of my favorite Perciveth quotes. The death mist, that is the best plan. Unfortunately, it is a terrible plan. That sums up every plan they've ever had, though, so, like, they're fine. I miss the sun, Bob said. The stars, too. I would like to say hello to the stars again. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. Damison took something from his belt. In his massive hand, the white shard looked like another toothpick, but when he offered it to Annabeth, she realized it was a sword. A blade of dragon bone honed to a deadly edge with a simple grip of leather. Honestly, I prefer the Drakenbone sword to her dagger. I'm very like emotionally attached to a dagger, and I think of like the dagger when I think of Annabeth, but I think like, I don't know, I just think the Drakenbone sword is like really fucking badass, and I love that. I say this as if I don't want a tattoo of Annabeth's dagger because it reminds me so distinctly of her. I just think it's a cool sword. Piper hoped Hazel would be okay. The last few nights since that fight with Skyrim, they'd had some good talks together. Being the only two girls on board was kind of rough. They'd shared stories, complained about the guy's gross habits, and shed some tears together about Annabeth. Hazel had told her what it was like to control the mist, and Piper had been surprised by how much it sounded like using charm speak. Piper had offered to help her if she could. In return, Hazel had promised to coach her in sword fighting, a skill at which Piper especially sucked. Piper felt like she had a new friend, which was great, assuming they lived long enough to enjoy the friendship. I love to see it. Strong female friendships in this series, in like any of Rick's books, just make me so fucking happy. See, we've got all this groundwork for, you know, one of the seven dying, and I remember being so stressed about like which member of the seven would die in Blood of Olympus, because surely they're not all surviving the series. I still kind of think one of them should have. I think the ending of Blood of Olympus is majorly anticlimactic and quite boring, and I think someone probably should have died, and no, Leo doesn't count. Jason will grace my throne room. Clever, Piper muttered. Take you all day to think up that line? It would have taken me like a couple weeks to come up with that, and I would have thought it was so good and I would have bragged about it, so I don't blame her for saying that as if it's real clever, because you know what, you're better with the puns than I am, babe. Charm speak worked poorly if the person wasn't attracted to you. Friendly reminder that Piper's charm speak worked very well on Annabeth and Mark of Athena. Just saying. I actually forgot that Piper was the one who brought Festus back to life. Festus was like dead, he was inanimate, and she brought him back to life through charm speak. Just through her own power of charm speak. Please God, never underestimate Piper ever again. Whenever he felt like giving up, plopping himself down and dying, which was like every 10 minutes, he reached over and took her hand, just to remember there was warmth in the world. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Annabeth laced her fingers through his. In the light of his bronze sword, her face was beautiful. A simp. I am going to guarantee she probably didn't look beautiful right now. As an Annabeth stan, she probably didn't. He's a simp. We're together, she reminded him. We'll get through this. I'm gonna cry. The way that the first thing they say to each other when they're reassuring each other is we're together, because they know that that's the most important thing and that's what the other needs to hear. I'm gonna throw myself into the sun, actually, I think. I'd settle for New Rome, she offered, as long as you're there with me. Man, Annabeth was awesome. For a moment, Percy actually remembered what it was like to feel happy. He had an amazing girlfriend. They could have a future together. Yeah, yeah, I'm just gonna go have a breakdown. If you'll need me, I'll be in the corner crying. For years, he had worried about Annabeth dying. When you're a demigod, that goes with the territory. Most half-bloods don't live long. You always knew that the next monster you fought could be your last. But seeing Annabeth like this was too painful. Percy just not being able to even look at Annabeth with death mist because it's too real of all his fears. I wasn't expecting this and this just made me laugh really loud. For a split second he thought, well hey, I'm just smoke, she can't touch me, right? He imagines the fates up in Olympus laughing at his wishful thinking. Lol, noob. Poison, Percy said. That's your specialty, right? He stood, his anger growing hotter in his gut. As a flood of venom rolled towards the goddess, the fumes began to make her cough. Her eyes watered even more. Oh, good, Percy thought. More water. Percy imagined her nose and throat filling with her own tears. Percy, Annabeth called. She had retreated to the edge of the cliff, even though the poison wasn't after her. She sounded terrified. It took Percy a moment to realize she was terrified of him. Stop, she pleaded, her voice hoarse. He didn't want to stop. He wanted to choke this goddess. He wanted to watch her drown in her own poison. He wanted to see just how much misery could take. Percy, please. Annabeth's face was still pale and corpse-like, but her eyes were the same as always. The anguish in them made Percy's anger fade. 1, kind of hot. Dark Percy, kind of hot. 2, though, I just love the exploration of Dark Percy, of him literally. That implies that he could bloodbend a little bit if he can control, at least in Tartarus, if he can control any liquid. You know, he's making her choke on her own tears. Like, he can control other liquids as well. I love seeing that darker side of Percy explored. I don't think we should make, Percy evil all the time, but I love seeing that seep through. I think it's a realistic response to trauma and anger that's welled up inside him, and it's a really interesting display of his powers. And then Annabeth begging him to stop, and that being what snaps him back to reality. I just love everything about that, and also it's very Anakin and Padme in a weird way, and I don't know, we love that dynamic. We love an Iron Man reference. Leo disliked her instantly. Leo, I wish you kept that energy about Calypso, I'm not gonna lie to you. Oh, I'm sorry, he said. I just fell out of the sky. I constructed a helicopter in midair, burst into flames halfway down, crash landed and barely survived. But by all means, let's talk about your dining table. The correct attitude to have, Leo. Yes, thank you. Look, here's the thing about Calypso. I really sympathize with her about her curse. It's horrible. She was given a horrible lot in life. As someone who, like Annabeth, has really bad abandonment issues and does relate a lot to the narrative of I grow to care for people and then they leave. I really sympathize with that being her curse forever. That shit hurts. And eventually you're going to get a little bit bitter about it, sure. But Calypso in Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo is a completely different character to Calypso in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. And I loved Calypso there. Calypso here, she's been left by so many heroes for so many years. She's not going to become this bitter and jaded and mean and cruel after one more hero leaving her. Cursing Annabeth is one thing, but the treatment of Leo here at the beginning is awful. The way that she's insulting his appearance and saying that he's a mockery of a hero is really horrible. You don't say that to people. I loved Calypso because she was kind and gentle despite going through what the gods had put her through. That's what I loved about Calypso in that first series. That's something that I try and emulate. That's why I love Cinderella and stuff. I loved that about Calypso, and here she is a mean person, and sure, that becomes lesser when she falls in love with Leo, but she becomes less mean because she falls in love with him. That's not a character I can relate to and admire anymore. That's not a character who I like anymore. Then we get to trials, and her and Leo are just she's awful to him. She does not treat him well at all. And it's upsetting because I loved Calypso, but she's a completely different character here. She just is. It just made me so excited and so happy to just get that tiny little mention of Clarice. That just made me very happy. Also, Leo has no right to be mad at Percy for hurting Calypso. He didn't fucking mean to. I'm not gonna get angry at Leo about the whole Percy-Calypso thing. No, I might, because I think he's particularly unfair about it in Blood of Olympus. I think Leo is very, very blinded by being in love with Calypso, and he doesn't have any kind of sympathy or understanding for where Percy was coming from and the position that Percy was in. And I don't think that that's fair to his friend, Percy. Leo just asking Calypso to make a little fireproof pouch for Frank. It just makes me happy. I love Leo. I'm not gonna leave you here after you helped me and everything. Of course I'm coming back. I love that Leo's just like, oh, of course I'm coming back for you, even though it's not necessarily, yeah, he kind of has feelings for Calypso here. He doesn't realize that she does as well, but just in his head, he's like, you helped me out. Of course I'm finding a way to come back here. What do you mean? I love him. I love him. Look, as much shit as I talk about Calypso and as much as I genuinely do not like Leo and Calypso together anymore, I did ship them after House of Hades because I do think the ending of them is really cute. Some of that chapter is really cute. They just get very unhealthy sometimes. And I don't love Calypso, but they're kind of cute sometimes. Shut up. Hello again. We had an outfit change because I went out to lunch with my father. I'm wearing actual clothes now, not just my pajamas. Occasionally I do that. Annabeth being like, oh, don't kill yourself. We're not that scary. Love of my life. She's everything to me. With the Joel, Annabeth realized what needed to happen. Like everything she'd ever done, it was a long shot. In a way that calmed her down. A crazy idea in the face of death? Okay, her body seemed to say relaxing. This is familiar territory. My point about Annabeth, exactly. She's chaotic. It's okay, we can say it. I remember the first time reading this being so excited that we finally got like a birthday for Annabeth, because like I say this a lot on the internet. I have, since a child, I always threw like birthday parties for Percy. The first 2 years that I threw them, I was throwing them for Percy, and I didn't know when Annabeth's birthday was, and it felt awful because I was like, I should celebrate Annabeth too, but I didn't know when her birthday was. But now we know, July 12th, and I don't have like a full birthday for her, like a full party that I do for Percy, because like, I don't know, that's just a tradition thing in my brain. But I write a song about Annabeth every year on her birthday. That's really embarrassing. Will I put this in the video? I don't think I will. Maybe I will. She pressed her face into his shirt and kept her eyes closed tight. She was trembling, but not just from fear. Percy's embrace was so warm and comforting, she wanted to stay there forever, safe and protected. But that wasn't reality. She couldn't afford to relax. She couldn't lean on Percy any more than she had to. He needed her too. 1, healthy relationships. Annabeth understanding that she can't rely too heavily on Percy. She can't use him too much as a crux because he needs her and she needs to be strong for him too. It's a two-way street. Very healthy. We fucking love to see it, but also to feel that safe in someone's arms, to feel like that at home in someone's arms. Percy like literally is her home. He is her family. And that's everything to me. Annabeth had wrestled with the same thought many times. She tried to convince herself Luke's death wasn't her fault. Luke had chosen his fate. Still, she didn't know if his soul had found peace in the underworld, or if he'd been reborn, or if he'd been washed into Tartarus because of his crimes. He might be one of the tortured voices flowing past right now. Like, you hope he is, not for your sake, babe, but for his sake. Hope you don't have to hear him though, because that's traumatic for you. Also, the idea of Annabeth Chase blaming herself for Luke Castellan's death or his fate breaks my heart, because she's right. He did choose his own fate. None of that is on her. None of that blood is on her hands. But I know that just realistically as people, she's going to a little bit, and that makes me angry. How fucking dare you, Luke Castellan? Fuck you, Luke Castellan. I blame him for this. Days in the sun hadn't tanned his skin. If anything, he looked paler. That's what happens to me in the sun. Big mood, Nico D'Angelo. Big mood. Yes, hiding. You've run away from both camps. You're so afraid you'll get rejected that you won't even try. Maybe it's time you came out of the shadows. I don't like how much this book is calling me out right about now. Stop it. But in his heart, he wanted to be at Camp Half-Blood. The months he spent there with Piper and Leo had felt more satisfying, more right than all his years at Camp Jupiter. Look, I know that Jason belongs in like many places and whatever, but I really resonate with him just being like, Camp Half-Blood's where I want to be rather than Camp Jupiter, because I'm a big believer of Camp Half-Blood supremacy. Camp Jupiter is way too intense for my liking. I don't think I would thrive at Camp Jupiter. I don't think I would be happy at Camp Jupiter. Whereas Camp Half-Blood feels like my home. You cannot control your parentage, but you can choose your legacy. As someone who comes from a complicated family, I just really love that quote. Also, Luke Castellan, take some notes. I just got so excited about the fact that Leo was just sitting there drinking coffee. I felt so represented by that. I too would watch the ship sail in and to just drink coffee, because if I hadn't had coffee for a while, I'd need a coffee. And then Jason goes and tells me Leo doesn't even like coffee. I feel a little betrayed. Jason had never really considered how important Leo's sense of humor was to the group. Even when things were super serious, they could always depend on Leo to lighten things up. Now, it felt like the whole team had dropped anchor. Not to be an It stan, but that reminds me of that one scene in It Chapter 2 with Richie. Percy Jackson descending into a fit of despair because he's realized his own morality realistically in comparison to every monster that, always reforms. It may take a long time, but they will reform. And then as soon as he thinks, my sons and daughters might have to face them, he just is filled with hope again, because he's like, no, Annabeth and I have a future. Demigods have lasted, and demigods keep coming back, as well as monsters. We have generation after generation, and Camp Half-Blood has endured, Camp Jupiter has endured. Me and Annabeth are going to get a future, and him just picturing what Annabeth looks like normally rather than with the death mist, because that's a little bit depressing, and just finding hope again, and literally just thinking of having sons and daughters, a ridiculous thought, an awesome thought, right there in the middle of Tartarus. Percy grinned. I can't describe the love that I have for this character. No other protagonist is on Percy Jackson's level, but having that realistic, doubtful moment, but then finding hope immediately, and finding hope in Annabeth. He loves her so much. I would... Bob, just without a doubt, offering to hold the button down to get them to safety, even though he wants to see the sky again and the stars, even while having really conflicting feelings about who he is and what his future is, what his past is. He's just like, no, I'm going to hold them down and help you guys get out. It's the logical thing to do, and you're my friends. I want to cry. The cement settled in Percy's stomach. He had always suspected how this would end. He would have to stay behind. While Bob fended off the army, Percy would hold the elevator button and make sure Annabeth got to safety. Somehow he had to convince her to go without him. As long as she was safe and the doors disappeared, he could die knowing he'd done something right. Shut the fuck up. Shut up, Percy, you idiot. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Shut up. Look, I know it's horrible and all that, but like, it is a bit of an honor that Tartarus is dealing with them personally, and he never even dealt with the Olympians. That does show how strong and how powerful Percy and Annabeth are. That is a bit of an achievement. Not one you really want to happen, but they can look back on that and have some bragging rights. Frank was also kind of worried about Leo. Sure, they'd had their differences, but after all they'd been through together, Frank didn't want to see Leo get his heart broken. This is what I love. Them just caring about each other and forgetting the petty shit. That's what I love. That's what I want to see. Coach Hedge and Mally being pregnant just makes me so happy. I remember the first time I read that being super excited. Me as a little child being like, oh my god, they're gonna have a baby and it's gonna be so cute because it's gonna be like half satyr and it's just gonna be the cutest thing in the world. Obviously now that I'm a bit older, I'm also understand Coach Hedge's fear about that. Him having the mentality that if he has to die somewhere, he should be dying at his wife's side, his pregnant wife's side, and he should be there to comfort her and protect her. I understand that more now, so it's a bit sadder, but it's really sweet still. I completely forgot that Coach Hedge brought in Clarice. This just made me so happy. Once again, we love any mention of Clarice. I love any mention of Clarice. Okay, for some reason in my head, the barley cakes taste like polyjuice potion, like they're edible polyjuice potion. I don't know why my brain has just been like, disgusting magic thing. I'm imagining it tastes exactly the same as this other disgusting magic thing. Because I'm creative, apparently. Seeing Frank take control and take command of a legion is actually really fun, because obviously we have all these implications about Frank being super powerful and his family being super powerful, but this is like one of the first instances where we see him be a leader, and it just makes me really happy. I love Frank so much, and seeing him actually really step into that role. On Jason promoting him, everyone just being super supportive of it and listening to his orders and looking to him as a leader, it just makes me happy. Friendly reminder that Annabeth's ideal way to die is to go peacefully in her sleep at age 80 after a nice quiet life with Percy. Every time either of them picture their future, they picture their future together, and that's very beautiful to me, okay? It's very personal to me. His spear yanked itself free of the god's flesh and flew back to Bob's hand, which made Annabeth gulp in amazement. She'd never imagined a broom could have so many useful features before. Brooms, who knew, right? You promised, seaweed brain, we would not get separated ever again. You're impossible. Love you too. This is my second favourite Perciveth moment of all time. My number one is Because You're My Friend, Seaweed Brain. I have talked about these things before. Percy doing his overprotective thing, using his hero complex to try and be a savior, and Annabeth just throwing his own promise back in his face, being like, no, you promised, we're not getting away from each other ever again. You promised, that's the thing. And then him being exasperated and being like, you're impossible, and her responding with love you too. The specific love you too was really important in terms of Annabeth's character, and I don't think people talk about it very often, because Annabeth is someone who, particularly in the first series, she obviously is so controlled by her abandonment issues, and we see this in the way that she responds to Percy interacting with Calypso, with Rachel. She's very, very insecure. She's very convinced that Percy's going to leave her, like everyone else kind of has, and she lets that control her, and she lets that fear be a huge part of their dynamic and their relationship, and she pushes away her feelings and she shovels them down and she deflects. The thing here is she has said I love you twice. Percy has not said it back, but she now has the emotional maturity, and she has gone through enough with Percy that despite all her abandonment issues, she has the emotional capacity to understand that he loves her too. Without him having to say it, she understands and trusts that he loves her too, to the point where she can reply it to him. And I just think that's a huge, huge moment in terms of Annabeth's emotional development and Annabeth's place in their relationship and her feeling stable in their relationship, and it's just everything to me. But Annabeth also knew that Percy wouldn't listen. He couldn't leave Bob to die alone. That just wasn't him. And that was one of the many reasons she loved him, even if he was an Olympian-sized pain in the Podex. That's one of the many reasons I also love Percy Jackson. We'll go together, Annabeth decided, knowing this would be their final battle. If they stepped away from the doors, they would never leave Tartarus. At least they would die fighting side by side. Oh my god. Oh my god. Annabeth Chase, I took your advice. I chose myself a new fate. If you had the chance to change your fate... I can't do a Scottish accent. I was really gonna hit you with that brave quote and I immediately regretted it. Just friendly reminder of the power of Annabeth Chase too. So Bob's just telling them that he'll hold the doors. Fun fact, this is really stupid, but every time I see a night sky that is like super filled with stars, because I live in like the suburbs, and so there's not heaps of light pollution. Like you can still see stars, but not heaps of them. So anytime I'm like further into the country and I see like a lot of stars, every time my brain will always just conjure up Bob says hello every time. And I know that that's stupid, but it does. If all monsters had to hear that song about liking pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, no wonder they were in the mood for carnage when they reached the mortal world. I like that song. I would happily listen to that song for 12 minutes straight. It is really unfair that they have to hold the doors closed from their side too. Like, give them a break. Come on. They've made it into the doors. Give them a break. Oh my god, please. Also, remember when we all thought the doors of death were going to be this super fucking angsty thing, and then they turned out to be an elevator with pop music playing? I think about that a lot. My job is to tell you that it's okay. You and Frank, you're good together. We're all going to get through this. And I hope you guys get a chance to be happy. Shut the frickety frack up. Leo Valdez is an angel. The world does not deserve Leo Valdez. I would kill for Leo Valdez. I would eat glass for Leo Valdez. Alright, but it's so unfair that Percy and Annabeth go through all of Tartarus. They finally get to the doors of death. They have to face Tartarus himself. Also ignore my cat just having a snack in the background. They have all these complications. They finally make it. They get there. They're knocked out because coming back from Tartarus is a bit much for mortal bodies, sure. And then like a giant's just there being like, I'ma kill him. Bit unfair. Bit unfair. I actually kind of love Hecate a lot though. She's one of my favorite gods. I'm gonna be real. I love any kind of sorceress, but Hecate, like, just also being willing to help demigods. I love her. I would once again like to talk about how Hazel is one of the most powerful demigods ever. I would also like to point out that Annabeth, once again, despite not having any like supernatural powers, she's the first to wake up. She has some kind of strength that Percy doesn't necessarily have. It reminds me of the fact that she held the sky for hours and hours longer than he did. She's awake and giving tips in Hazel's battle before Percy is even conscious at all, really. And I just think that says something about Annabeth's incredible strength and perseverance. Percy and Annabeth being on their feet and trying to help with both their swords drawn. Guys, lay down, get some rest, please, please. But you guys, Tartarus has to be the real story. What happened down there? How did you... Percy lays his fingers through Annabeth's. Just that small gesture, like, communicating that, you know, they got through it because of each other. I actually hate Raina saying, without you, I doubt Percy could find his way out of a paper bag. I hate the insinuations that Percy is helpless without Annabeth or an idiot or stupid without Annabeth. Obviously, they make each other a great team. They used it as a lyric in Pick a Side in the Lightning Thief musical, or the song that was cut in the Lightning Thief musical, and I don't dislike it as much there because it's coming from Clarice there, and it's just her saying that he couldn't find his way out of a paper bag. I don't hate it as much there because it's coming from Clarice and the Lightning Thief. Here it is coming from Raina, someone Percy has fought with, someone Percy trusts, someone who is on Percy's side, is part of their team at this point. And I don't know, I don't like the insinuations that Percy's an idiot. He's not, and I think it's probably a place of massive insecurity for him, and I just don't like that insinuation. I think a lot of the fandom plays into that a lot and has this narrative, and I just don't agree with it. Percy Jackson is a deeply intelligent person, and Annabeth agrees with Raina here, but Annabeth knows that Percy is a deeply intelligent person, and I know that they're kidding, but like, I don't know. Yeah, Percy couldn't have made it out of Tartarus without Annabeth, but let's not joke that he couldn't get out of a paper bag without Annabeth. I'm probably reading too much into it, but I don't love that line. We went to all of the trouble of saving the statue. I went to most of the trouble, Annabeth reminded him. Hell fucking yeah, you did, babe. Stand your ground. Take that credit. Fuck yeah, babe. Annabeth took his hand. He drank in the sight of her now that they were back in the mortal world without the death mist, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, even if she was still thin and worn like him, and her grey eyes were stormy with thought. He loves her so much. He loves her so much. If I have to sail to my death, you're not dying on me, seaweed brain, Annabeth said. Remember? Never separated again. And after we get home... What? Percy asked. She kissed him. Ask me again once we defeat Gaia. He smiled, happy to have something to look forward to. I literally spent however long was between this book and Blood of Olympus, so probably about a year, just imagining every fucking scenario in which what that could be, what Annabeth is going to tell him. And it obviously turns out to be a very cute, very wholesome little thing, but I really was going for like the big stuff. I wrote a fan fiction, I remember, in which this was a callback to something else. I wrote a fanfic in which basically Percy had spontaneously proposed in Tartarus, and Annabeth had been like, not here, this isn't happening here, and then her saying ask me again when we get back was a callback to that moment, and she was telling him to ask her again, propose again. I don't know why. Obviously that wasn't going to be canon, but I wrote a fanfic about it. It was a whole thing. I came up with many a concept for what that meant. The ending 2 lines of this book are fucking mean. They're mean. They hurt me emotionally. They are mean. Okay, that was House of Hades. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know how long this video will be. Hopefully not as long as the Mark of Athena one was. Hopefully you sat through all of it. If you did, shout out to you. Hope that these reading vlogs are living up to the expectations you guys have. I know they're very delayed, but I'm trying my best to get them out as quickly as I can now, and hopefully they're decent. I am not looking forward to reading Blood of Olympus next, so let's hope that Nico and Raina get me through, as they usually do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I adore all of you. I love you, and I will see you soon. Mwah.